We going? Yay!
All right, that's good.
All right, so we're live. Okay, so hi everyone who's watching. We are members of Wild Goose Marriage Academy. I'm just going to be interviewing my parents, Paul and Carol Quist, who are the founders of this company, just about kind of some of the difference between Christian marriage and secular marriage. So before we started, I know Mom, you wanted to say something
Yeah.
about the business.
Well, actually, I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about these Wednesday nights because we're now starting to do every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and we want to explore different topics related to marriage, especially Christian marriage. And so we want to try a few different formats to see what works the best, and also what seems, we want some feedback from you too on what works best. So we've done kind of a teaching time. Tonight it's kind of Jonathan interviewing us. We have some ideas about, there's several couples and families that we would like to interview because we think they have a lot of things to teach us and all of us. And so we want to just kind of look at some different ways. So tonight we thought, well, we'll have Jonathan ask us a few questions. So here we go.
All right.
Yeah. Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Jonathan, for doing
Yeah,
this.
thanks.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. The other a few weeks ago, my friends and I were watching the old Superman from the '80s with Christopher Reeves, and it was funny because my friends noted that Lois Lane and Clark Kent actually ended up sleeping together, and apparently back in like the '80s, that was actually quite controversial because they weren't married yet, and we kind of were laughing about how much standards have changed since then, and not a huge long period of time. So what do you think's kind of happened to our notion of marriage? Why do you think that people, like if now, it seems like the average person would just say, it's like, oh, well, why are they getting married? Do they have a tax problem or something like that?
Right. It's funny because, going back even further on television, like in the 1960s, you look at the old Dick Van Dyke Show, and they're a married couple. They don't even share a bed. They're in twin beds with a nightstand between them. And so things have really changed in the last few decades since then.
Well, yeah, like this I Love Lucy was like that too. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
I was writing down a couple statistics because I thought you might ask something kind of like that. But anyways, half of women between 25 to 29 have now lived with a partner at some point, which is kind of crazy from like when I was just a little girl and I had never ever heard of that. So now half of that age group has at some point lived with someone else. So what's happened? Well, a lot of changes have come to our society and to marriage, and of course marriage is kind of that foundation. It's supposed to be the building block of society, even though there's some ideologies that want to change that to maybe the state or the individual being the building block. So that's one of the changes.
I think one of the big changes, of course, is the introduction of the pill, the contraceptive pill. Because with that, what we see a shift coming where people understood that sexuality or the marital embrace was meant to start a family. And it was naturally in the context of marriage because this is the context for raising children. And with the introduction of contraception and not only the pill but other forms of contraception, the focus shifted from procreation to self-expression, to pleasure, to bonding, and so children became less essential in the minds of people. And so if you don't have to have children, with sex, well then you don't really need to have marriage, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think too, just the movement away from we're starting a family to what really matters here is romance or love or companionship. Whereas even before, I'm not saying that it was perfect before, because sometimes, like the arranged marriages or political marriages, like marrying for political gain isn't a great thing either. But I think, when we really look at what's God's design for marriage, we go right back to the beginning, like John Paul did in Theology of the Body. You go right back to the beginning, and the first commandment in the Bible is be fruitful and multiply. So marriage, it doesn't say that, obviously it's this romance, the love, the connection, the friendship between a man and a woman is it's vital, it's very important. But really, even more important, if you're going with Casti Connubii, or is it Arcanum? Anyways, one of those where it mentions.
Those are the documents.
Yeah, I know.
From the popes.
Yes. So in one of those, it's talking about. It says the primacy is with the fruitfulness, like having children, and so we've moved very, very far from that, so that it's almost not even attached.
Right.
At all.
Procreation.
No, it's just kind of like it can be a fringe benefit. And I'm not saying everybody,
or a byproduct.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
but not the purpose.
Unwanted byproduct sometimes.
But it certainly isn't regarded by many as one of the two primary purposes of marriage.
So why is marriage so important? Why should people get married rather than just living together, which seems to be more the standard?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it really is God's plan for the human person. Obviously not every human person, but again, going back to Genesis, he created not just men, and he didn't create just women. He created men and women, both created in the image and likeness of God. And so it is part of our, it's foundational to being a human person. And again, sometimes God calls people to a celibate vocation, like to the priesthood or to religious life. And sometimes people are, don't find the one, or they don't feel called. And so there's people who also have are single, obviously. So, but this call to fruitfulness is in all of us, and this call to communion is in all of us. And so, whether that's a call to marriage or one of the other states, so it is essential. And so we're moving away from kind of what is essential humanity. We're moving away from communion and community, and especially, we've all felt that a lot this past year with all this COVID stuff.
I would want to add that marriage as an institution, is meant to build up civilization, and so the permanency of marriage is a fundamental part of marriage and of a stable and a healthy society. Kids do much better, emotionally, physically, spiritually, when they're raised by mom and dad who are committed to each other, till death do them part. And so that fidelity and that indissolubility of marriage is essential for not only the sake of that one family, but for all of society.
Right, like JP2, as the family goes, so goes the nation, and so goes the whole world. Right. So it is that the first path for each of us is in the family. We're born into a family, and if for some reason a child loses parents very early, that's a huge loss, because that is where we are formed in our basic trust of other people, in our morals, in our faith, in just good manners, in like all of the foundational things really are supposed to happen. And so yes, we're talking about family, but of course at the heart of family is the marriage. And so when we lose marriage, and fewer people are getting married, and people are getting married older, and people are viewing marriage in a more disposable way, we are losing out on essential humanity.
Well, it seems like even though marriage is on the decline, it seems that people still are very invested in having relationships. And they think that that's a really important part of their fulfillment. I mean, that's an ancient desire. Even Plato talked about in the Timaeus this myth where the original human being was was both male and female, sort of like back to back, sort of like melded together, and so our attraction to the opposite sex is kind of this desire to sort of become this this whole sort of like person. And that's kind of where the terms kind of like soulmates comes along, and so that's why I think a lot of people have this idea that there's just this one person out there who I need for my fulfillment. Is that kind of compatible with a Christian understanding of marriage, or is it a bit different?
Well, it's a bit different. I mean, where I see an overlap is the human beings, men and women, are created in the image and likeness of God. And we know of God through Christ's revelation that God is a communion, an eternal exchange of love, a communion of unending love. And so, the Father from all eternity begets the Son. He pours the deity into the second person of the Trinity, and the Son receives all from the Father, is equal to the Father. He returns everything to the Father in love, and the love between them is so full that it spirates from all eternity and forever. The Holy Spirit, the third person, Holy Trinity. And if in fact human beings are created in the image and likeness of God, who is an exchange of love, well then we too are created for love. And until we understand love, until we experience love, we're not going to feel fulfilled. We're not going to be complete, because that's essential to our nature. It doesn't mean everybody's called to marriage, but everyone is called to love.
Yeah, and the compatibility, like we've talked about the compatibility myth, like during marriage prep and stuff, because there isn't just one person in the world who is, like if I hadn't found Paul, I would have missed, like
your only opportunity.
My only chance. So there isn't just one person. Obviously, there should be attraction between the two, and you want to have. Well, there's lots of things. You need to discern very, very carefully who you marry, and you want shared values. You want shared faith. You want to check out lots and lots of things about each other. But people who think, oh, I've married the wrong person. No, I mean, marriage is going to hurt sometimes, because it's meant to rub off some of the rough edges. It's meant for us to grow in virtue and to become a better person. And living with anybody, even if you were living with a roommate, if you're being a good roommate, you should get polished up a bit. But certainly in marriage, Paul often talks about that marriage as life in a rock tumbler, where we're kind of polishing off, well, sometimes breaking off big chunks of this unpolished gem. But the whole point, not the whole point, one strong point is to become more fully who we really are. But different people could do that. Like, there isn't only one person. And so people who, whether they've been married 5 years or 20 years, and they say, oh, I've fallen out of love, and I have to find this another person who really fulfills me and my soulmate. That's Hollywood. That's not God's call to marriage. That's it's a fake thing that there's only one person who's compatible.
I'd also add to that, as far as compatibility being a myth, there's not two people who are naturally compatible. You have to become compatible, and that's through getting rid of vice and building up virtue. And as both husband and wife do that, they become compatible.
Yeah, and we have to be willing to suffer, because there will be, suffering is common to all people, and it's common to all marriages. And so that, I mean, obviously there's lots of joy, or should be joy also, but there will be some suffering, and that suffering can actually, oftentimes that's what God uses to make us better people. It can help us draw closer to each other and closer to God.
So what specifically makes a marriage Christian? How is, we're talking about marriage, kind of in a general way, but yeah, what's specifically elevates it or changes it from, just a secular marriage, or, going before a justice of the peace? What's the difference?
Well, it is Christ himself who makes the difference, because in a Christian marriage, Christ is very much at the heart of the marriage. He is the center, the focus of the marriage. Christ, raised the dignity of natural marriage to the level of a sacrament, and with his presence and his grace in the marriage, the marriage itself becomes a means of communicating God's life, God's presence, God's help, God's power to husband and wife, so that God is at work perfecting husband and wife in love.
Yeah. So you can, there are natural marriages that are very happy and good and strong, and natural marriage in and of itself is a great good. And throughout the whole Old Testament, before Christ established it as a sacrament, it's a great good. But it's just that there's more fullness with the sacrament, and Christ's help is huge. Like when I was talking about suffering, when we have the one who shows us how to suffer, how to love sacrificially, and not only shows us but then empowers us through the Holy Spirit to do those things. That's, I was going to say game changer, but that's not right. But it does.
Yeah, it is a game changer.
It is. It helps so much. So sometimes I kind of go, how do you do it? And I know some people do have happy marriages who don't have Christ at the heart, but I don't know how they do it, because I think we need the sacraments of, we need reconciliation. We need to be working on our own stuff and asking God for forgiveness and dealing with some of our sins, and to keep growing in marriage.
I'd add too that in a Christ-centered marriage, in a sacramental marriage, that there's an eschatological dimension. That.
What does that mean?
It means it's oriented towards eternity, and it's like husband and wife are on a journey, and it's not only to the end of life; it's into eternity. And so, as a Christian couple, we're trying to help each other get to heaven. I'm trying to help Carol to become as much like Christ as she can become, and she's trying to help me to become Christ-like too. And together we're trying to form our children in Christian faith. And again, a natural marriage may abound in a lot of natural virtue, and that's a good thing. And the husband and wife may love each other, but they still don't have that vision of eternity and the goal of becoming Christ-like.
Yeah.
So what does that mean practically, though? How do you actually live that out in the day-to-day, nitty-gritty of married life?
I think it's kind of like having a vision in a business. Like if you have a mission statement, and your mission statement it calls you to something greater. And so if your mission statement is just kind of closed, it's like a very small, and it's only about the here and now, it's not going to motivate you as much. It's not going to help you through the tough spots as much when it gets when it's tough going. So you kind of need to have this, like we've talked about in our business, actually having these big, hairy, audacious goals, however you say that, big goals. And what bigger goal could you have than to say, I want us to get each other to heaven, and our kids, and as many other people as we can to get to heaven. So when I'm feeling distressed or fearful or mad or whatever, and it's not like I always think, oh, well, I'm getting ready for heaven. But it can inform our days. It can, like a lot of times, I'm just doing little short prayers, because when I'm distressed or something, I'll just say a short little, Jesus, I trust in you, or a Hail Mary, or just a short help kind of to God. So it does inform each day.
But back to the nitty gritty, the way we live this out is that, we start off our day together in prayer. We end our day together in prayer. We also do our own private prayers. We pray the Angelus or the Regina Coeli during Eastertide, morning, noon, and night, and this helps.
Get to Mass.
Yeah, we get
when
to
we
Mass certainly every Sunday, but as many days in the week as we can, and this really shapes our day. Everything is oriented around that life with Christ.
Yeah, and again, as you know, it's certainly not perfect. We do not have a perfect marriage, and we are not perfect people. But it does help to keep us more hopeful and to keep us working on our own stuff, because all of us do have stuff, and and to be hopefully reaching out, becoming more generous people, so we can be reaching out to others.
Every night before we go to bed, I hand Carol the bottle of holy water so she can bless herself. And I bless myself with holy water. I mean, all these little things help.
So both members of the marriage have to be Christian in order for it to be a Christian marriage. Is that right?
Well, if it's going to be a sacramental marriage,
In the Catholic Church.
Any sacramental marriage, right?
Yeah.
Both husband and wife
that's
need to
true.
be baptized Christians.
Yeah.
Because without baptism, which is the gateway to all the sacraments, then it's a natural marriage, which is a good thing. But in order for it, again, to be sacramental, fully Christian, husband and wife together.
Right, and so that's
would be
not like an
Christian.
exclusive thing. It doesn't mean like you can't have a sacramental marriage. It just means that if you want to have a sacramental marriage, then whoever's not baptized can ask to be baptized. And there's a process to go through. But it's not like the church is saying, no, not going to do that. It's just that there's a few steps to become baptized, and then you automatically, if one is baptized, it would become a sacramental marriage.
So you don't have to get remarried or anything? Or
No.
you don't have to get...
No, it automatically becomes a sacramental
okay.
marriage.
And in fact, the Catholic Church views any Christian marriage, Catholic or not, as being a sacramental marriage. And so,
if there was a valid baptism.
so as you know, we started off, the first 20
Some
years of our life as 40 years of our life as Lutheran, and first 20 some years as husband and wife as Lutheran. And when we were received in a Catholic Church, we didn't have to be remarried or anything like that. And they recognized that because we were both baptized Christians, that our marriage was sacramental all the way back.
Yeah.
Oh, so even if you weren't married in a church, even if people were married on the beach,
If they're baptized,
If they're baptized
Yeah.
and they're following the stipulations of their faith, it's and of the law, it's a valid marriage.
Well, even if they were married in Reno,
right.
right? If they're both baptized.
But if they're Catholic, they're
Right,
bound by church law
Right.
to follow the rules, the law of the church with respect to marriage,
Right.
and that is to be married before an official representative or witness of the church, priest or deacon, bishop, and to be married in the church. However, not all Christians are bound by that.
Right.
Oh, okay. So why do Catholics have to be married in a church, and would it be valid if they didn't get married in a church, like if they got married on the beach or something like that?
Well, actually, Catholics are held to the proper form, and just like a Catholic, all of the sacraments have both proper words, proper forms, and then there's also there's form and there's matter. Oh, you're turning on the light?
Yeah, just need it's a bit dark.
Oh, okay. That might be better then. So yes. So, for instance, maybe it's best to just do an example. So, a baptism would not be valid if the priest or deacon baptized in the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, the Sustainer. That would be lack of form. That's not the proper form, and so that would not be a valid baptism. However, and so looking at marriage then, if you're not following the proper form, like being married with a priest or a deacon in the church and with witnesses, then again you're not following the proper form of the sacrament, and so thus it would not be a valid marriage. Again, sometimes people have gotten upset and saying, "What do you mean I'm not married?" Well, it's just saying again that the church does have the right to say, "Here are the sacraments. here is what a sacrament is. This is the form of the sacrament. And again, we receive these from Christ through the church. And so, it's not a mean thing. It's just saying that there are certain ways that a sacrament, that need to happen for a sacrament to be valid.
And if a couple have found themselves in the situation that they weren't validly married, that can be easily rectified. They just have to get their marriage made right in the church. And that's essentially to say your vows, in the church.
Well, and we still do stuff. We've done marriage prep many times with couples. It's called convalidation. And so, but it's not a big, huge ordeal. But so there is a means of making it right.
So we had a question actually in the comments here. So it says, how do you best handle religious differences when they get toxic? So I guess if people, maybe if they are either Christian or maybe are one's, Protestant, one's Catholic, or even if one of them's not Christian, what's the best way to sort of mitigate those situations?
Yeah, and the important thing is that the writer of that question says when they get toxic.
Right.
And so if they've gotten toxic, I think husband and wife need to slow down, to back off, to make sure that nobody's being punished or pushed or prodded. That you
showing respect.
Show great respect for each other and great patience. And the Catholic, or the Christian ought to, pray for and love their spouse who isn't Christian, but shouldn't in any way, browbeat them.
Right. Or if, let's say, you have a Baptist and a Catholic or something, and they're loggerheads over things. I think, I would say what you said, and also, yes, respect is huge. I think, love covers a multitude of sins. I mean, really, I think whoever is concerned about this, it's your duty even more than the others. I mean, you can't change the other person at all or their attitude. All you can do is change your own attitude and your own response. And so you ask God for extra help. And you say, Lord, this is very difficult because it's very close to, it's at the heart of my heart. And so you have to ask God for help, and you have to try the best you can to love and respect and to work out something that's going to be fair, like as far as going to church and working out the details like that and talking through that's why we always make very sure when we're doing marriage preparation that couples have talked through, if there's mixed marriages, that they talk through how are we going to raise the children, because that's often a big one, especially baptism. It's a really big thing, and it can be divisive. So it's too late for this couple to talk before marriage, but now it's just time to be very patient, very loving, very respectful,
and prayerful.
Yeah. But it's hard. It is tough.
So I guess the next question I want to ask is, so why does the church have such, high expectations of people? There was a lot of regulations, especially for Catholics, for marriage, and so isn't that just overly burdensome? Wouldn't it be easier if the church, lightened up on some of its rules and just, let people, live a little bit closer to how average people live in the world?
Well, again, we started off by talking about how things have changed so drastically from the 80s. So we could just keep on loosening up, like society has been. It's not for the good of the human person. People are not happier now. It's like God's design for the human person is we're created in His image and likeness, and when we live according to His image and likeness, we will be happy. And if we fight against it, and if we say, no, it's basically what Adam and Eve did, right? It's kind of saying, when they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's kind of like, no, I want to be able to decide what's good and bad. And when we do that, we aren't doing ourselves a favor.
No. Yeah. I agree with you. People have more license today. There's a lot more
it's not freedom.
A lot more sin and self-expression than there was 50, 60 years ago. But people aren't freer. They're more slaves of their passions. And the church wants our true freedom. And true freedom is to know the good and to be able to do the good. And so the church provides these rules to help guard our freedom and to really ensure our happiness. Again, like Carol said, we may balk because of original sin. We want to set the rules ourselves. But in humility, when we submit to God's rules that He gives to us through the church, it tends towards our happiness.
Well, and it's just like people focus on rules. I mean, it's not so much like the church is saying, no, 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 no. Well, I mean, that's the way they're interpreting it. But it's basically saying a huge yes to God's plan. And God's plan is that there is this beautiful union between man and woman that is blessed, oftentimes, not always, but blessed with children, and that this is the best place to nurture the next generation and to pass on the faith. And that this deep love, this deep friendship between a man and a woman is it's God's plan. And for communion, like Paul mentioned before, we're created for love. We're created by love. God is love. We're created to love. We're created for love. And so when we find that calling, whether it's to marriage or the priesthood or celibate life or just single life and some kind of mission, whatever God has for us, that is a huge yes. And God, it's kind of like, well, okay, this isn't a great, I don't always come up with the best examples, but it's kind of like if you're going to read a car manual, or if you're going to ignore it, and then you just say, well, I'm going to just do whatever I want here, and I think I'll just put Kool-Aid in the gas tank. There's going to be consequences. And there will be consequences whenever we go against our Maker's manual, which is Scripture. When we go against it, there will be consequences. And we see that all over our society now. We see it in so many children's lives. We see it in, that's one of the things that drives me for this whole Wild Goose Marriage Academy, is thinking of little children who are devastated, like just really devastated by their parents' divorce. And marriages can work. Like, you can work through different, like almost any issue, even if you're still divorced, even if you're divorced already, you can still come to reconciliation. God is there willing to help. So yeah, there's just a lot of consequences when we go against God's beautiful, the law is actually a beautiful gift from God. So should I go into that?
No, let's
okay, we'll do your next.
So it sounds like you're almost kind of saying that if you just follow the rules, then you're going to be happy. Is that kind of
Well, no, I mean, the rules aren't an end in themselves.
Right.
The rules are there to protect our relationship primarily with God, but our relationships with each other. So the end is relationships, it's love of God,
right.
It's love of each other. If we're just following rules, there's not going to be any satisfaction, any joy in that. But there is great joy in a loving relationship with God and a loving relationship with your wife or your husband and your children.
Yeah. So no, the emphasis, I mean, it often is on, all those rules. But no, it's a call to Christ Himself, and if you're married, it's a call for the two of you to come closer to Christ and to again see Him and experience Him as not only the best example of how we are to live our lives, but also the one who gives us the strength and the forgiveness and the generosity that we can. I mean, He gives us the strength and the power to live that way. And so, but some of it is quite countercultural, but it's always based on the good of the human person, on the dignity of the human person, on the unifying, because God is love. He only wants good for His people. So the 10 Commandments aren't a burden. They're actually, this is where our freedom lies. Mm-hmm. If I go against thou shalt not steal, I am not going to be more free. If I go, Costco has lots of money, they don't need my $20 for this shirt. I mean, I'm justifying my sin. I am not going to be a more free or a happier person if I break the commandments. If I commit adultery, I am certainly not going to be a happier person. Any of those laws are not, so yeah, you can call them just rules and think of it in a bad way, but it's within God's law, within His plan, that we have our freedom, and Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, sorry.
That's okay.
I was just going to, and it is all linked to love. Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Yeah. And again, so the end isn't the rules, the end is love. Yeah. And we guard our relationship with God, we guard our relationships with each other by following the commandments that God has established and has given to us through the church.
But what if you do all that and you're still not having that, the fulfillment that you want? I mean, Jesus didn't exactly, life on earth and in the most happy story,
Well, that is suffering is often where saints are made, and there are some really incredible stories about saints who have had awful marriages and who have become. I'm trying to remember some of them
Saint
right
Rita?
now. Yeah, Saint Rita, but there was another one.
Saint Marguerite Duvel.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, you guys are thinking of them. But there was somebody else that I can't place right now. But anyways, so you do hear of people who, even though they're in excruciating situations, and that's not okay. Anyways, and they learn to live with the suffering and become more and more loving people themselves. And sometimes there's the French couple, and he was a doctor.
Oh,
and I can't remember.
Le
Sieur, yes. And so she basically gave, basically took on kind of, I suppose, a penance or something for her husband, and took on an illness and just saying, Lord,
she became ill. She got
she
cancer.
became ill.
Yeah,
I know, but then she said,
but
use
then she
this
offered,
suffering.
She offered it up for her husband's conversion.
And she said that he'd become a Dominican priest, and he scoffed. He was quite an avowed atheist, and he later on did become a priest. I'm not saying that, I mean, the church does teach that when people are in certainly abusive situations and dangerous situations, then it's important to separate. And sometimes for the sake of justice and for working out of finances or custody or those kind of things, sometimes divorce has to happen. But it should be very, very, very rare. And so always done with the help of, under the guidance of a priest preferably. But the fact is that marriages, like, one person can change a marriage. One person on their own, even if your spouse is miserable, one person, by you changing, by you stopping doing behaviors that are hard for the other one, or that are pushing him or her away, and then by growing in virtue and working on yourself and becoming as happy as you can become, and attractive, and working on all of those kinds of things, and growing closer to Jesus often does draw the spouse and the children along.
I just want to get back though to what Jonathan said. And your question reminded me, if I don't have it right, but you said, what do you do if you're following the rules, you're being a good Catholic, a good Christian, you're still not satisfied, you're still not happy? And the truth is that our ultimate happiness, we can't find it in this life. Yeah. Our Lady told Saint from France, from,
I don't know which one you're talking about.
Where the healing waters are.
Lourdes.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Saint,
yeah.
What's her name?
Bernadette.
Saint Bernadette. She said, I can't promise you happiness in this life.
Oh, Mary said to Bernadette.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't promise you happiness in this life, but in the next. And so, again, we have to live with that eschatological horizon, to live for heaven, because of sin, because of we live in a broken world, because we're made ultimately to be with God forever. There's always going to be something lacking, some dissatisfaction, some things that is missing, and ultimately Carol can't fill that void in me, and I can't fill that void in her, and only God can. And that longing will only finally come to rest, and our fulfillment will only be complete when we are in heaven with God. So there is some sorrow in this life because of sin, and as soon as we accept that, it makes it much more tolerable. And even though there's sorrow, still there can be purpose, there can even be joy, even while we are living in this veil of tears.
Yeah.
So, what you were saying before, Mom, about working on your marriage, even if your spouse isn't cooperative, maybe we should talk a little bit about that.
Are you talking
resource.
about me?
no, but that resource that we have. I think I've linked it to the chat
okay.
here that
Okay,
people
yeah,
can use.
yeah,
So do you have anything that you want to say about that for a closing remark?
Sure. So yeah, we've come up with a. Oh, maybe I'll just look at you guys. No, we've
sure.
come up with what's it called? Just a little booklet, basically. It's like 8 or 10 pages long, and it's called 1 Week to Renew Your Christian Marriage, and it's one person can do it. This one actually it's made for women, but we'll also have a copy of it made for men. If you're a man and you're the one who wants to heal the marriage, and maybe she doesn't, but it's basically just some exercises. That we're having you add something each day, like some kind of action. But the hardest part, well, is you start the day with a prayer, 5 minutes. If you're praying more, that's fine. But you have to do a bare minimum of 5-minute prayer in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening. So that might be an addition for some people, and for others, you can do more. But then there's one kind of assignment for the day that doesn't take very long. And then the hardest part is to stop doing certain behaviors. So the behaviors that you're contributing that are kind of harmful. And so you might be, especially if he's, in this case, if he is not interested in working on the marriage, or maybe he's already leaving, or maybe he's even having an affair, or, but so there's things that you might be doing that are pushing him away, and you have to stop those things. And so those are things like whining or harassing or snooping on like his cell phone or his computer looking for stuff, or nagging or yelling or shaming, or the list goes on. There's a long list in there, but there's a lot of things that we can do that push people away. And so it's kind of difficult, but there's so sometimes you might be saying too many things or doing too many things that are pushing away. Other times you might be a woman who just kind of lets anything happen, right? Like you kind of let him abuse you. Well, then in that case, and it explains again in this thing, in this tool, then you have to set a boundary. And so there's a bit of a push, like there's some work to do, but really within 1 week, you actually can make a difference. Mm-hmm. Even without him doing anything, just you becoming a different person, you stopping doing some of those behaviors and adding just a little short assignment each day. Take a look at it. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I guess, has linked it to this video. So if you can just go there, take a look at it. There's also a little video that goes along with it that explains a bit more.
Yeah, well, I guess that's it. We can kind of, wrap up if you guys have any closing comments to say. Or...
No.
No, thanks.
So.
I appreciate you asking us good questions. And hope that we were able to answer them and we weren't too boring.
No, I thought that went pretty well. So yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
So thanks everyone.
Thanks.
And I guess we'll see you again next week.
Next week.
God bless.
Good.
Take care.